Oh hey, how's everyone doing today? So, as we said last time, what we're doing for the remainder of the year is we are going to be solving quadratic functions. And today, the method we're going to use to solve quadratic functions is by taking square roots. All right, we messed around with square roots, aka radicals, quite a bit in the last section. All right, and we're going to kind of continue with that during this lesson. So something important to remember is that when you solve equations, and we're doing a specific kind, a quadratic equation, you do the opposite, right? Where it has adding to get a variable by itself, you subtract. Where there's multiplying, if you want to get the variable by itself, you divide, etc., etc. So, quadratic functions, if you recall, are functions that have a variable squared. All right, and you might remember that quadratic functions are generally in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. All right, now the times where we're going to solve quadratic functions by taking square roots is when b is 0, meaning basically it's not there. If that b is there, then you can't use that method. All right, so this entire section, there will be a b of 0. All right, so let's first look how to do these. We'll start with a very basic example. X squared equals 4. Well, what we're trying to find here is what number squared, meaning what number times itself, is equal to 4. Well, like I just said, all right, when we solve equations, we use the opposite operation. And the opposite operation of squared is the square root. So we're going to square root both sides. And just like before, when you have a plus 4 and then you subtract 4, they cancel out. Here, the square and the square root cancel out, and I'm just left with x. Now, of course, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So I square root the 4, and again, square root is what times itself equals 4, and that's 2. Now, the weird thing about these type of problems is we don't actually only have one answer here, all right? There's actually going to be two, because there's not only one number that when you multiply it by itself, it equals 4. There's actually two. All right, some of you are probably shouting at your computer because you know what it is, but the other one is -2. So almost every single one of these problems is going to have two answers, both the positive and the negative. And we could write them separate, but back in the day at some point, there was a very lazy mathematician who came up with a symbol, and it's basically a plus and then a minus under it, and that means plus or minus. So what I just circled here means that x can be either +2 or -2. So this thing is saying the same thing as these separate two answers. All right, x is equal to plus or minus 2. Let's try another one. We'll stick with simple for now. Let's say x squared equals 81. All right? So again, the opposite of squared is square root. What we do to one side, we have to do to the other. Square root of 81 is 9. Don't forget, we have two answers. So it's going to be plus or minus 9. That was crazy. Let's make this a tad bit harder. We got x squared, let's say, plus 3 equals 28. You know what? I'm going to actually skip that one for now. Let's just go with x squared equals 28. Whoa, we just got crazy up in here. We're going to square root both sides. Cancels out like it did on the other ones. Now you may be thinking, 28, not a perfect square. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to break it down, break that radical down, just like we did in the last lesson. All right, again, I don't want a decimal as your answer. We're going to break this down. 28 is 7 times 4. I cross out the one that I'm done with. 4 is 2 times 2. All right, and this has a pair, which is 2. That goes on the outside. That doesn't have a pair, so that's going to be 7. So my answer is x equals, again, there's two answers, so I throw that plus or minus in front. And we got x equals plus or minus 2 root 7. And that's going to be our answer. Interesting. So we're utilizing that skill that we learned last time. Let's try one more like the one we just did. X squared plus 3 equals 21. All right, now this has an extra step. We're going to solve this just like we solve regular equations. You deal with the stuff that's farthest away from the x first. So I'm going to get rid of that 3, and since it says plus 3, I do the opposite, which is subtraction. And that gives me x squared equals 18. I square root both sides. Not a perfect square, so I'm going to break this puppy down. 19. Let's go 6 times 3, 18, not 19. 6 is 2 times 3. Cross out that 6. 3 has a pair, so it's on the outside. 2 doesn't, so it's on the inside. Don't forget, we have two answers, your plus and your minus. Oh my goodness, we are crushing it. All right, so now we're going to try a little bit tougher. Sorry, trying to do two things at once. And let's try 2x squared minus 10 equals 40. This one looks a little bit harder. It is, but nothing we can't handle. All right, I need to get rid of everything farthest away from the x first, so opposite of minus 10 is going to become plus 10. Of course, we do it to both sides. So it's 2x squared, 40 plus 10 is 50. This is multiplication. We're going to do the opposite, which is division. X squared is 25. I'm not solving for x squared, I'm solving for x. I'm going to do the opposite. Opposite of squared is square root. This one is a perfect square. Square root of 25 is just 5. Don't forget your plus minus. 2 answers. It equals 5. Let's do more. Why not? Let's go with seven x squared minus 11 equals 52. I'm going to add the 11 to both sides. That's 7x squared equals 63. Divide both sides by 7. X squared is 9. Square root both sides. Square root of 9 is 3. That is a perfect square. Don't forget your plus minus. All right, I made those last couple a little bit easy. So let's up the game a little bit. Maybe we'll do 2 more quick ones and then that will be done. I'll give you your assignment and then we'll peace out. Let's try 2x squared plus 7 equals 607. Whoa, big numbers. We attack this exactly the same way. We're going to subtract that 7 from both sides. 2x squared equals 600. Divide both sides by 2. 600 divided by 2 is 300. Square root both sides. This is not a perfect square, so we break that puppy down. 300 is 100 times 3. 100 is 10 times 10. I see that's a pair already, so I'm not going to even break it down further. We get a 10 on the outside. We can't break that down any further. So that becomes x equals, don't forget your plus minus, 10 root 3. This was amazing. All right, just something to note. If you try to take the square root of a negative number, that is what's called a non-real answer. And we're not doing that in this course. So if you see something like x squared equals negative 4, that's going to be no solution. That doesn't mean anytime you have a negative answer, it's no solution, because you could have something like negative 3x squared equals negative 27. So although we see some negatives here, once I divide by that negative 3, that becomes positive 9. And notice it's x squared equals a positive. All right, if you try to plug square root of a negative number in your calculator is going to start screaming at you, error, error. So there's going to be x equals plus or minus 3. All right, again, remember I'm not looking for decimals. I want it in the simplest radical form. So if you get something like this particular problem, if you give me whatever that is, 12.3 or whatever it is, then that's going to be incorrect. All right, have a good one. And I will see you guys next time.